club, half hour.
It's not bad. It almost looks
Nothing.
like the wall is so cool. It looks like I have like a virtual backdrop, right?
You, I don't know. Is this like some sort of like interiors brag? Like, look at my cool house type situation? Is that what's happening?
You're
Remember,
hilarious.
unless you
Ben,
people are
you
watching us on YouTube, they cannot see
that's
the
true.
house. So
Sorry.
you have a
I
very
should
cool
state
house,
that.
Jeff. You have a very cool house.
By the way, Ben, you also have a very cool house. But yes, regardless,
God.
it's been a couple weeks, Ben, but we're back. Nice to see you. I want to say
Thank you.
something. It's been freezing in New York. I can see it
It
from
is.
my own upstate camps.
It is freezing in New York.
But I am extremely jealous that you've got a chambray shirt on right now. I'm not gonna lie. Ben's wearing a classic chambray work shirt. I'm pretty curious to know who it is.
Frism Works.
Looks great.
Thank you. Do you know Frism
I mean,
Works?
I don't. Tell me
Korean
more.
Korean brand, workwear, sort of workwear, casual wear silhouettes. Heard about them first through the late great Oi Polloi,
Oh yeah, yeah.
men's store that was in Manchester and London for decades, and then got bought by JD Sports and then like weirdly swallowed and closed. And hopefully those guys come back at some point or another. But yeah, so I heard about Frism Works through Oi Polloi, but then this came from Wallace Mercantile, which is a store in Vancouver.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, I'm pretty stoked on it. It's a good vibe. But
I s-
chambray,
Go ahead.
it feels like a year-round fabric to me. I'm surprised to hear you say that. I would think you
Well,
could wear that in Miami.
I think I mean, yeah, you can wear it. It's so interesting because I feel the the aspect of Miami to me that is maybe lacking is in the menswear scene. And there's actually a lot of people that are
Sure.
working on trying to bring more of that here. That's not to say that you can't buy menswear. I mean, you can certainly buy every
Oh, you
luxury
can
brand,
you can
you
get
name it,
beach trunks almost on every corner.
totally. And
Men wear
Hawaiian
beach trunks, right?
shirts.
Yeah.
And because of that, like I mean, you just never see you never see anybody in chambray. Like
Okay.
I'm probably the only guy. You know what I
I got
mean?
it. Okay.
It,
Is this your point of
today's
difference on
actually
your
fairly
apps profile? Like, I'm the guy in the chambray shirt.
totally. If I could find somebody that loves chambray, like give me a call. You know what I'm saying? Um, but
Oh boy.
the point I was making is that there's something there's it's not that fashion is lacking. Maybe my kind of fashion is lacking, if I
Hmm.
can put it that way, right?
Sure.
And on that note, I want to ask you: do you feel like you're in New York City,
I
which
am.
that is the pulse I miss? Do you feel like we're kind of coming around again to a little bit of legacy stuff, the stuff that's always stuck around, say the chambrays?
Well, I don't know if it's that so much as a wider thing. I wrote about this yesterday in Sick, my newsletter, which is it feels like there are weak signals around a return to, or not even a return, but just like a progress towards fewer better types of things. Like
Totally.
Laura Riley in this week in magazine wrote about the trend towards high end, or the trend away from high end dupes, or dupes from the high end. I don't remember. Anyway,
No,
she
on Magazine, she was talking about how now the dupes are getting duped in the
right.
sense in
Well,
the
and
sense that
they're getting
it's getting
they're getting
circular.
brought. Well, but they're also being brought up scale, right? It's like you know, yes, this is an on trend sort of piece or silhouette. Can I have a less shitty version of it so that I can buy it once instead of needing to buy it
That's a
over and over
great way
again?
of putting it. That's a great way of putting it, right?
Um, and so there is that. There is the fact that in a wider luxury downturn, Hermes, right, which is the height of craftsmanship, is the one that breaks records
The
and
only one.
the
The
only
only
one,
one
right? Hmm.
who and we can talk about that. I think it's quite interesting. But on the point around, you just made a really important point around having less or just having better. Alec
Right.
Leach as well, a former writer of ours. He's got his own a newsletter on Substack, and I apologize for the name, but he focuses very much on this idea of how do you try to make things a little bit more circular, sustainable, and just this week he's talking about like the pieces that just remain
Right.
not only in fashion and
What's
style.
that newsletter? What's it? Who is this?
Yeah, let me find it. Alec Leach. Oh, my mouse
Alec
is not
Leach.
working,
Okay,
Ben.
got it.
But while I look it
Oh
up,
yeah, we talked to Alec on the old the clubhouse thing years ago with the
we
we had
probably
him on
did
the didn't we?
actually.
Yeah, we did.
We
We did.
here's
Shout out Alec. My
yeah.
apologies for losing track.
And by the way, Ben,
This is what
it's incredible that you
this
actually
podcast is for, is for me to just personally apologize to all of the people that I've lost track of.
well, I also love the fact that, like, rarely do you make an error. I think that's the most impressive part. But anyway, back to Alec's point, and also, Noah
Frequently
Johnson.
wrong, never in doubt. Sorry, go ahead.
Noah Johnson, of course, at High Snob. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
his first major piece was exactly that. Like, where are clothes going? They're going back to being clothes, and I think
Right.
that's quite interesting. That's a very so I mentioned that because it feels a little bit like 2007 to me, where we had this recession, everyone was kind of turning to Americana a bit,
Mm.
buying from small makers. And just curious, I'm wondering if you're feeling the buzz as well there. I mean, you already shop at small makers, so maybe you're not the guy to ask.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think so. I think there's two vectors there though. Like on the one hand, there's the return to quality and craftsmanship. There is the fascination with or the continuing fascination with distinction, but then also there's this kind of raw nationalist MAGA, you know, go America
Oh
energy
yeah. Oh
that
yeah.
also informs some of it. It's a way it's a way to signal that you're not uh totally a liberal cuck. Like you can still put on a chambray shirt and
Y-
carry
The
some carry some
if you-
already pre-chopped wood to the fireplace of your Airbnb type
I think
situation.
in it that's you really are nailing something, even though it is an Airbnb, um, for others it's not. But the point is, like, there is a connection that I definitely make to clothing that just is made for purpose like that.
Yeah,
That
of
actually
course.
looks great, right? And there's so many of us that do it, and I'm really curious to see what happens. One of the stories that's been coming out now is that especially the dupes being duped by a little bit higher quality and
Hmm.
and things of that sense is also that hold on, I gotta cut
What
this
is
back
it?
'cause I just lost train of thought. What the hell was that? I was gonna make a loop back to sustainability, circularity, Noah's article. Um,
Noah's Arcticle.
sorry, I know where I was going. We're
Go.
talking a lot about menswear, by the way, if you're
Say
just
it.
joining us on Culture Club. Um, you know,
As if anyone
the
is
Mc-
just joining us at this point.
right.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
So I don't know. Should we keep that in? We probably should. So
We
Ben,
don't edit anything.
McKinsey and BOF, of course, put out their State of Fashion 25, and there were,
Oh,
the three
okay.
big
Interesting.
takeaways
I
that
didn't
we
see that.
have talked about. It's really interesting. It came out actually before, it came out post-election, and it was just, to me, it's spot on. Three major
I'm
points.
sorry. I have seen it. Sorry. Please continue. Go ahead.
No, it's cool. So the 3 points around that were that number one, sustainability is not top priority.
Yep.
That there's too much and then the second one was that they're moving away from um, uh, they're moving away from not only sustainability as well, but also in general, they're starting to move away from product. There's too much product on the market right
Yep.
now. And because of that, there's a little bit of doom and gloom from the C suite, which makes me think that if that's the trend we're seeing, are we going to be trending up? Are we trending up into the clothes that, to the point you made, that look great? Maybe I'm tired of buying a piece of shit from Shane or Timu,
Hmm.
getting that feeling, this like fabric that clearly can't be burned and topping up. So in that case, I'm wondering if it's making number one from the US consumer, America a little better. I'm very clear there about what words I'm using. But in the
Right.
second part, the connection that you have and I have to actually being outside. Every American loves being outside. I think it's a way for us to kind of get reconnected again. Now,
Mm.
I say that as a guy that sits in a Republican state, and he can't do it here because he can't wear chambray. But chambray could save the world, Ben.
Okay. This is a very long and tortuous
I know that was a
way of
mess.
getting
That was a
of way.
mess.
No, not at all. Long and tortuous way of getting to the thesis that chambray can save the world.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering if you're
All right.
seeing it.
All right.
Like, are you seeing a shift in it? Do you feel like Also,
Well,
are you seeing Gen X being marketed more too? That's another conversation that keeps hearing that
no,
we've plateaued a little
no.
bit within the world of Gen Z, millennials, and nobody's been talking to Gen X in a while, right? And
Hmm.
there's I've heard a lot of conversation that a lot of dollars are starting to pull that way as well.
That's funny you should say that. No, I don't hear that. I don't see that. I don't notice that. I wonder if that's your algo um pointing you in a lopsided way to uh you know
It could be.
the thought that that's the case.
See, but now I have to write about this. I must
Okay.
go do the research, and we'll come
I
back
would.
to it.
I mean, listen. That's actually a question. Was like when we're going to see the Jeff Carvalho return to the printed word, kind of thing.
I think if you
You want
can
to break any
imagine.
news here with us, Jeff?
No, but if you can imagine, taking a break from something, you got to get on the court a little bit to bring it back. So
Yeah,
yeah,
of
I'm
course.
excited.
No, I've been doing the same. I've been doing the same thing with Sick because I've been trying to figure out how to better reward my
Dude, the quality
paid
of your writing
subscribers.
is top notch, Ben. I mean, I read yesterday's
Oh,
newsletter. I
you're
went
nice to say.
deep into the back of it. And again, I don't want to be like a Substack Kool-Aid guy, but there is something much cooler about scrolling through a Substack newsletter set inside of the app than going through an Instagram feed or even like an RSS news feed.
Sure. Well, I mean, you get it's the whole thing that we used to talk about with the reason video is so powerful is because it's sight, sound, and motion. What those newsletters allow you to do is create stories in multiple vectors, and meaning there's visuals, there's words and opinion, of course, there's context, there's levels deeper that you can click into. But it does bring up an interesting sort of um, topic that I wanted to talk about, which is
Sure.
the like I hate the return of, right? It's a stupid device because everything is always ebbing and flowing and becoming more or less prevalent. But there has been a bunch of interesting print collateral that has come out come across my desk recently,
Love to see it, Ben.
that I wanted to talk about. So few different bits, right? On the one hand, this is, and I'm holding up to the camera for those who are not watching, a
Is
catalog
that, hold
from
on,
the Hammer
is that Alice
Museum.
Coltrane?
The Hammer Museum in LA has a show of works from and inspired by Alice Coltrane. It's called Monument Eternal,
God, I nailed
and
it.
it by happenstance. I was in town for the night of the opening of the show, which brings together a bunch of different artists, among them Rashid Johnson and
Super.
Martine Sims and Jamal Cyrus and a bunch of others. And it is, like Alice Coltrane is a musician and let's call it, transcendental spiritualist leader,
Hmm.
the wife and widow of John Coltrane, of course, and father, or excuse me, mother of the musician Ravi Coltrane, among another, a series of siblings. Anyway, good show. I went to the opening. Flying Lotus DJ'd.
No way. That's
It was a
cool.
very un LA thing. It felt like the old Saturdays at PS1 in terms of the
Oh, I
crowd
miss
was out
those.
for it. They were dressed for it. They were up for it. A friend of mine who is a transplant to Los Angeles was like, "Yeah, you could almost be in New York tonight,"
That's cool.
which is a very like
Ben, has PS1 stopped their
no, no,
Saturday sessions? Okay,
they
because
still
it's
do the
one of my
warm up.
favorite things.
Yeah, they still
Yeah.
do the warm up only in the summer. But in any case, this print catalog, which covers the exhibition and is just a cool like little collector's item, was one thing, print collateral, that I have brought home from art shows recently. Another one that I have brought home from art shows recently is this zine that Supreme helped to underwrite from the Larry Clark show at Rutkowski,
Oh
where it has
shit,
an
you hit it.
it yeah, it has an interview in it, along with photos from the show, which is basically all, let's call it, outtakes from the photos that inspired kids.
Where's the show, by the
Um,
way?
it just closed on Saturday, but it was at Rutkowski 68 in Tribeca. so this zine is further sort of outtakes from Larry and from Tobin Yellen, um, along with an interview between Larry and Leo Fitzpatrick, who organized the show,
Oh,
curated the
that's
show
cool.
at
I
Rakowski.
feel like I read that as well in your newsletter this week.
Yeah, but it's a cool little thing. Like, $20 for the zine. They made Supreme paid for 300 of them to be made, so highly limited, available only
Yeah,
at the
I love
gallery.
those. I love a good
And
zine, man.
cool thing like that. And you're seeing stuff like that happen more often. And which brings me to my third thing. So last night I went to the release party of this, and I'm holding it up to the camera again here.
Yeah, Ben is holding up
Ju-
what color would you call that? Is that fuchsia?
I would just
Purple?
call it pink. The the we're appropriate yeah, approaching pink, approaching magenta. Anyway, it's a publication by Byline, who, full disclosure, I am an advisor to on, and it's called Matters of the Heart, and it's in partnership with a brand called Julie, which is an emergency contraceptive brand. So in other
Oh
words,
wow.
like the morning after pill brand, that is part of the same family as Starface, the acne kit,
Yep, yep, yep.
Overdrive, which is a drug testing kit, and one Blip, which is a nicotine product, like a Zyn competitor.
Oh, no
Um,
kidding.
yeah, really like fascinating family of Gen Z focused, personal care and pharma kind of.
Ben,
Bre-
Ben, I don't mean to interrupt you. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt you
don't
to
worry
finish
about
that
it.
line, but you said the Gen Z, it's still targeted at Gen Z. So talk to me about it because
Yeah,
there must have been plenty of people that were not Gen Z there. So if you could, and
not
without
that
giving,
many actually.
really,
Oh yeah, I was the oldest person in the room by a decade at least.
oh, I'm just kidding myself here, clearly then.
Oh yeah, no, no, no. I
Uh,
mean, well, that's the thing that Goots and Megan do. Sorry, these are the founders of Byline. I mean, they really bring out their crowd, and their crowd is very young, diverse, downtown, creative, et cetera, et cetera. And but the reason that I hold it up is that I like the fact that this brand is communicating through an editorial approach. In fact, I spent some time talking to Layla, who's their new editorial director, who comes from um, Nylon, and I guess previously worked at Vice a little bit, although we didn't lap over. Um, and the idea that it's like the way that these brands want to communicate and have dialogue with their audiences is through conversation, through storytelling, through personal, exposition, narrative, so on and so forth. Because as Layla said to me last night, like hopefully a product like Julie, which is the emergency contraceptive that they make, if you're a young woman, hopefully you only buy that 2 or 3 times in your life, if at all, right?
if at all.
If at all. And if you're a young dude, hopefully you never have to buy it for a significant other, or whatever the case is, but at the very least you should be aware of it. The thing that the But they still want to have a relationship with people, and I think it's because you look at the incredible success recently of Hims and Hers, going from like hair replace or hair loss treatments to ED treatments to
Right.
now semaglutide inhibitors, right, getting into onto Ozempic territory. Like, they go, all right, so how can Julie be a personal care brand for young women across a bunch of different sectors? We have to start a conversation with her now through our EC, emergency contraceptive, and then we can get into all of the other stuff. And so
Got
this
it.
cool little zine of custom stories about falling in love for Valentine's Day was the way that they're doing it.
It's it's interesting because they're getting a consumer that would, if I dare say, would usually go to a store and discreetly purchase something like this or do their
Yeah,
best. And now they're trying to build a conversation around it.
yeah,
When you and I were saying, hey, maybe two or three times your life, and I was saying, hopefully never, the reality is that it does happen, right? So
yeah, of course.
how how do you have compassion?
Hmm.
How do you help somebody at that point? And it sounds like Julie's trying to hit on that because nobody's
Well,
talking about it. You don't want to
yeah,
talk to your doctor about this shit.
That's right, and it also is, it takes a
A
sort of
male doctor, sorry, if I could say that.
take. Well, I mean, look, it's as with anything around reproductive health. Like in a perfect world, you don't talk to anybody about it because you don't have to, right? Like
Right,
that's
right.
we all get to keep these things private, but that's not always the case, and so knowing how to deal with reality is important. The thing I was going to say though is that it strikes a middle ground in terms of like marketing messages and relationships with consumers that I think is really circumspect and appropriate. And it's not dissimilar to what Dos Equis did with The Most Interesting Man in the World back in the day. It's like, I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I choose Dos Equis, right? Like, I don't always buy emergency contraceptive, but if I do, I want to know that there's a brand that's out there for
I,
me
in
that
fact,
speaks
in
my
fact, I
language
would
and that, yeah,
absolutely, Ben, because quite frankly, I can't even think of another brand in that space. So why not own that mind share, which I think is interesting, and as well to build, this, I think they're clearly using the right hallmarks that at least tend to work, which is build that community, build that trust, and
yeah,
keep letting them know that they can come back to you when
yeah,
they need help,
that's right.
right?
That's right. Well,
Interesting.
I mean, look, this is what great brands do is that they provide value at every touch point throughout the life of your interaction with them so that
Right.
you can always come back to them, count on them. You know,
And
it's like Chambray. It's the Chambray of the marketing world, right? You can always come back to it. It'll always work.
totally. On that note, for a second, has anybody actually written a book on the fact that we can constantly, almost by generation, reboot not only ideas, not only
Hmm.
IP, but also the way that we tend to reach them? I mean, I would argue that it's quite difficult to reach anybody today because of the noise.
Yeah,
And being able to pick up that magazine and read through it, I think is something important.
yeah.
Um,
Well, so there's an interesting. It's not exactly an answer to your question, but there was an interesting article in a Substack newsletter called "Adjacent Possible." This guy Stephen Johnson wrote um, about a media theory that came up in the 80s, which is essentially like in an information poor society, the search for information is highly valuable. In an information rich society in which we live, what happens is um, the search becomes much less important because we are surrounded by and deluged by and overwhelmed by information, and the filtering becomes much more important. And actually, the argument for, let's call it AI, right, is that it filters at a level that allows you to then right size and manage your consumption in a way that is more in line with the way that the human brain has
totally.
evolved or human societies has
There
evolved.
were there were a couple apps that were launched over the last 5 years that were trying to digest news as well, and fortunately, I can't remember their names, but one of them was pretty good, and it quite frankly looks exactly like how, AI
Yeah,
cites sources today.
you thinking
Do you
of
remember
like
the name, Ben?
artifact maybe,
No,
or
Artifact was the thing that came out of Kevin
from
Stronson from,
Instagram
Instagram.
System. Yeah,
No,
that's
this
right.
was another app that came before it, and it was just a great little
Post news.
no, I felt like it was one word. We'll have to look
Mm.
it up. Wait, actually, on that note, let me ask ChatGPT. What was the name of the app that um what was it that
Chat
Demise
GDP.
and
This is the
Para?
German socialist
I know, it's funny. I say that in my
AI.
class and they constantly correct me. I'm such an asshole for saying it.
Well, no, you're blowing your cover as an East German spy. Like you're so like you've been in deep cover since 1989, just holding it down for Chat GDP.
Oh my God. Let's see here. Anyway, while chat okay, there's two of them, I guess. One was called Blocks, the other one was called Utter.
Mm,
Otter rather,
I don't.
Otter. I think
Oh yeah,
Otter
yeah.
actually is still
Well,
around.
no, Otter. I was writing about. Matter of fact, I wrote about Otter in my newsletter yesterday. I'll tell you the quick story because I think
Please.
this is really fascinating. So Otter, my buddy Kyle Fitzpatrick and I are bouncing around, and we're gonna do a little podcast together because he's like he's an expert on the internet, and I'm of course old and confused. So we're going to do a kind of intergenerational like info transfer podcast. And he invited me to into his Otter account, which he uses to keep track of things. And the Otter got permission to my calendar, which is cool. Fine. I said yes to it. But then, unbeknownst to me, it started inviting itself to all of my calendar appointments,
Yeah, I saw that.
some of which is fine and some of which is just like is unnecessary and some of which is a little weird. And one of the weird ones was it showed up to a lecture, like a Zoom lecture given by this artist Trevor Paglin, who works a lot with AI. And it, unbeknownst to me, was hanging out, listening to the lecture, recorded all of the points, and then sent me a summary of it. And I was just like, whoa.
Yeah, that's great,
I
right?
mean, well, it's great, but it's also weird and has the potential to be sinister and has the, there's a dystopic aspect to it, like where, there's just some agent, right? We talk about agentic AI as being the frontier, but it's like, yeah, there's some agent just working in the background, like recording everything that you do and then going back and sending you a précis of it. And it gets, you get pretty far into the world of like San Junipero, as Kyle pointed out yesterday, where it's essentially like all of this data from the life that you've lived starts to inform a worldview that you can't see past anymore
Oh,
because
I know what you mean.
you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
so it
Here's my take
strikes
on
me
that.
pretty weird. And the fact that, sorry, just one final thing, the fact
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they recorded a conversation about the implications of AI was, I
That's
thought, a
great.
really interesting little
Yeah.
meet cute.
I've been
What were
in
you gonna
meetings
say?
where people I've been in meetings where people have used the AI.
Mm-hmm.
Um and in Brian Morrissey and Troy Young's newsletter this week, Troy actually talks about using this feature on Chat
P.
GPT.
There you go.
Holy, oh my God. Chat GPT,
cover intact.
an app I use every day and I've paid for since it launched. I still cannot say. But anyway, he was talking about how one of the things I started doing around a project I had was building an argument and defense on an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And within ChatGPT, you can use one of their more powerful engines. I think it's called IO or O1.
Sure.
And it
Oh, one.
actually,
Yeah.
you can actually look at it think, which I think is interesting, right? You can see it kind of blend through. But project to me feels like the first office task manager that I can have, meaning I can bundle together a variety of ideas,
Mm-hmm.
including inputs that I send it, photos, stories, maybe an audio file, and it becomes almost like its own Oracle, Ben, meaning
Right.
that I can go into that folder and I can search specifically within that data set.
Right. Sure.
And as Troy was saying, it's kind of a game changer for research, especially if you're working on a story where you need to sit back
Yeah.
or you're
Sure.
it can also monitor, which I think is super cool. So let's say we were working on a story about sports today, and we wanted to know some percentage change based on who won a game. It could output that for us every day, you know?
Right.
Anyway, I'm quite excited from that side. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are parts of AI that I think, yeah, I mean, like I've said this before on the show, Ben, like I have students that abuse the shit out of it. Like they're not even smart enough to remove the prompt they use.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but this is not using those tools to make you smarter, right? These are not using the tools to effectively help you better yourself. This is, being lazy, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I don't know. It's interesting actually. I just got um well, to say I got roped into it is not exactly true because I volunteered myself, but I have recently this week gotten involved with the fast developing and short term production of a museum show
Oh, wow,
of
Ben.
artwork to with from a bunch of artists that I really love and care about. And I'll talk more about that later when I can
Yeah,
say
yeah.
more about it.
I'm excited to hear that.
But I am sitting at the center of this maelstrom of stuff that needs to be coordinated, and I'm
Sorted.
thinking to myself like I probably need a suite of AI assistants or something like that. So
Yeah, yeah.
I might hit you up and get a little advice there.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
as anyone can do with either of us, right? Our DMs are open, so anybody listening, watching, like, you want advice from us, hit us.
Yeah, hit us up.
We'll give you the
Join us
advice we
on
have. It might not be great, but
join us on Wednesday mornings in Brooklyn with Ben or Miami with me. And
Yeah, yeah.
um, Ben, we've blown through a half hour. Next week, we absolutely need to talk about James Bond and the franchise and what Amazon did this week.
Acquiring
Because
acquiring the rights, buying out the Broccoli's. They bought all the Broccoli's.
literally bought out the broccoli, Ben. If you're do us a favor out there, guys, subscribe, like our show, let us know what you think, and yeah, Ben, enjoy. I hope the weather gets better in New York, Ben. I hope you have a great weekend.
It's just gonna get warmer from here. It can only get
Of
warmer from here.
course. All
All
right,
right,
Ben.
Jeff. Great weekend.
Take
Thanks
care.
everybody. Talk to y'all soon. Later.
All right.
Cool.
Nice one.
Let me see. Are these? I don't know what these
I
buttons
was just
are.
thinking during the show how much I now